You got fear, hit by smiles, hit by plastics, perfumes, feminine gauze, masked by maskers, vacuums, and makeup files. And you call me dirty, say I'm never worthy, and I call you flirty when you getting chirpy. The rider of the pros, well, he knows that he shows.
There's something appealing about a grungy rock band. The same can be said about a dirty old writer or a dirty old man. There's something authentic in the filth. And in this era of polished social media images, it's becoming harder to find. Some of us have never gotten dirty, have never reeked of cigarettes and beer, have never fallen into a pool of our own vomit. Good for you. Heinrich Karl Bukowski didn't chase cologne, clean clothes, or polite conversation. He chased horse races, beer, and women who looked like they'd been thrown out of better homes. Thin women, fat women, young and old. He loved them all. He even wrote a book about them called Women. There's a story, The Most Beautiful Woman in Town, about Cass, the scarred, beautiful weirdo, half American Indian, all sexy. Bukowski writes, "There was also a permanent scar along the left cheek, but the scar, rather than lessening her beauty, only seemed to highlight it." So this Cass was a real wild card, and that's part of her appeal. The gambling man has no problem rolling the dice on Psycho when sexy has her chips on the table. Look at the modern guys who go to Thailand to chase crazy, twisted bar girls. Of course, they're not as poetic about it as Bukowski was. They're merely sex pats, brutes. They speak in broken Tinglish and banality. They say things like, "We go boom boom long time." But Bukowski, he was a barstool philosopher, man. A philosopher of dirt and booze and truth. Bukowski had style. The Most Beautiful Woman in Town, Cass, spoke about her beauty thusly. "Because people think it's all I have. Beauty is nothing. Beauty won't stay. You don't know how lucky you are to be ugly, because if people like you, you know it's for something else." And perhaps Cass was right, because 30-some years after Bukowski's death, people still seemed to like him. And he was certainly no male model, so they must like him for something else. Perhaps it's because there was a truth to Bukowski, and ugly and truthful beats polished and fake every time. It even defeats beauty. Maybe a thing of beauty isn't a joy forever. Maybe John Keats was full of shit. Maybe something ugly can be a joy, if it's true. We haven't experienced forever yet, but thousands of years after his death, people still talk about Diogenes the dog. A reminder to everyone who's struggling with poverty and ugliness, perhaps you too can build a legacy for yourself by living in a barrel and masturbating in public, if you do it with style. Diogenes was a cynic philosopher who made pigs seem refined. A man who lived on the streets without the aid of pain-numbing opioids. A man who called bearded, barefooted guys draped in a white cloth overdressed. So what did Bukowski have in common with Diogenes? In which ways were they different? Let's peer under the dumpster lid and find out. There once was a Greek philosopher who wandered the streets of Athens holding a lantern and looking for a real man. Now, while that may sound like the plot to the next Matt Walsh documentary titled, "What is a Man?", it actually describes the actions of Diogenes the dog. Would Diogenes find an honest man if he searched under the fluorescent lights at a modern downtown office building? Tell me this. Where's the honesty in doing a job that makes you feel miserable? Lying to yourself in the mirror when you brush your teeth? Lying to a coworker saying you're doing fine? Lying to a client to close a sale? The world is filled with politicians and salesmen. Some of them work in office buildings that line the downtown streets. Others work online, running scams, selling courses on how to sell courses. writing sales pitches about how to write sales pitches, writing books about how to write books. If you can't lie big enough, if you can't sell shamelessly enough, you can't work selling billion-dollar lies in the offices and in the government buildings. And you might end up in the bars or on the streets, selling $1 lies and 50-cent stories in a world where billion-dollar liars make the rules. Bukowski wrote about the $1 liars, the real ones, the ones who drink alone, who gamble until the fridge is empty. The liars who've never lied about insider trading, but they did lie on a Home Depot job application once. They're the type of liars who will tell you they're out of smokes when they've got 2 left. Not the liars in slick suits who promise you riches from their multi-level marketing pyramid schemes. Diogenes barked at the people in power. Bukowski just lit a cigarette and said, "They're all full of shit. People who believe in politics are like people who believe in God. They are sucking wind through bent straws." In a world of noble lies, these men gave us ignoble truths. Politicians lie for votes, salesmen lie for commissions. Bukowski's lies were stories. He wrote fiction, not legislation. He wrote poems, not tax code. The drunks at the bar? They're honest in their brokenness. You get a guy too drunk and broken, he won't bore you about the latest sports ball game. The drunks are usually too drunk to talk about the latest political gossip. The office workers, on the other hand, they might never stop. "I don't hate people, I just feel better when they aren't around," said Bukowski, famously. Diogenes, too, felt better when others weren't around, going so far as to tell Alexander the Great, "Step aside, you're blocking my sunlight." We come into the world alone and we die alone. Why in life should we be any less alone? And when Bukowski was alone, his mind ran wild, spewing his bawdy barroom tales onto a typewritten page. But he wasn't always alone. Sometimes he had female companionship. Bukowski cavorted with white trash weirdos, working-class winos, and women who wore bruises like perfume. I'll avoid calling them whorish women, even though it's alliterative, because I got class. Sometimes decorum takes precedence over wordplay. Dive bar angels with devilish proclivities, women who look like all the heartbreak of America, poured into a dirty shot glass and garnished with an orange peel. Bukowski wrote women with raw tenderness and toxic longing. Diogenes? He jerked off in public and called it a philosophy lesson. He didn't appear to be an advocate for marriage, allegedly saying, "Young men not ought to marry yet, and old men never ought to marry at all." So Bukowski was the progenitor of the simp, and Diogenes was a primitive version of the modern incel? Nah, not so fast. Because they had style. That's what distinguishes them from some of the lesser men of our time. Style. Bukowski said, "To do a dull thing with style, now that's what I call art." You see, Bukowski wasn't consuming women as content. He consumed them as art. When did art get replaced by content? Around the same time the muse got replaced by a screen. To do a dull thing in a dull way, now that's what I call content. Content. Things contained in a receptacle, like the contents of a box of cereal. That's not art. That's shit. The world has changed. Now the streets are quiet, the bars are empty, 21.5% of Gen Z doesn't drink. Cass, the broken angel of Bukowski's story, she wouldn't be yelling in the night anymore. She'd be live streaming it. Ring light, link in bio, subscription tiers. The scar on her face would be a branding asset. The madness would be monetized. That's the real tragedy. We turned our beautiful losers into brands. The strange woman at the bus stop now has a 3-camera setup and a Patreon. Cass used to live in a tenement apartment. Now she's in Bali doing skincare tutorials. OnlyFans made her famous. Now she's dead. And Diogenes? He'd struggle to find a man on the streets in 2025, let alone an honest one. Can the dog still bark in a world where everyone's on mute? He might just fill his barrel with ice water, crawl inside for a Wim Hof breath hold, and never return to the surface. It would certainly make for fascinating content. Bukowski cared, but he hid it in bourbon. Diogenes didn't care, and made sure you knew it. Bukowski had style. Not the kind you can buy, it was earned, bruised, romantic, the kind you bleed. He suffered, but he never sold out. Diogenes had freedom, radical, uncomfortable, lonely freedom. He lived it like a dare. Both rejected everything you're supposed to chase, and in doing so, they left behind something bigger than money or comfort, a blueprint for not caring in style. One left behind his stories, the other left a myth. There's a certain kind of man who fantasizes about waking up at noon, cracking a beer and telling the world to fuck off. It's an archetype. The dirty iconoclast, the drunk poet, the filthy old man, the dog. Bukowski lived it. Diogenes became it. But what happens when that character disappears? Maybe you get North Korea. Maybe you get a town of anonymous men. Men with no fire in the belly. Men who sit down to pee. Who eat oatmeal. Who pay their taxes and mow their lawns and apologize for existing. They're good men. They go to church. They vote. They try. And maybe the world is better because of them. But still, a world with no stray dogs? No madmen shouting in the alley? That's not a society, that's a kennel. So even though they're dirty, maybe it's men like Bukowski and Diogenes who keep us out of the cages. Maybe we need them. Bukowski didn't need to live in a barrel, he just needed his beer and his writing. And Diogenes, he wasn't just a beggar, he was a mirror, held up to a world full of liars, saying, I see you, you're not free, I am. So light a cigarette, don't try too hard, and for the love of all that's real, stay wild, dog.